At 38,000 feet, Ethan's baby is screaming so loudly the entire plane turns against him, until a single mother across the aisle stands up, takes Lily into her arms, and does something no one expects. The moment haunts Ethan for months and changes his life forever. Ethan Gate boards a packed flight from Chicago to San Diego, clutching his overtired, overstimulated 8-month-old daughter Lily. He's prepared for stares, for judgment, for the whispers that always stab through him, but not for what actually happens. As Lily's cries escalate into full-body sobs, passengers twist in their seats, a flight attendant approaches with that tight professional smile, and Ethan feels himself unravel. His wife died moments after birth. Every day since has felt like a test he's failing. Just as he's about to break, a woman beside him leans over, reaches out her arms, and gently says, "Let me help." Before we jump in, if you love real emotional stories that remind you how good people can be, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Twister Stories. Your support helps us share more moments of kindness with the world. Don't be that person who watches for free and never subscribes. Click it. Do it now. You won't regret it. Thank you. Let's get back to the story. The red-eye from Chicago to San Diego was supposed to be manageable. Ethan had prepared everything with the precision of a CEO managing a product launch. Feeding schedule calibrated to flight time. Diaper bag stocked like a field hospital. White noise app downloaded and tested. 8 months of solo fatherhood had taught him that preparation was the only defense against chaos. But Lily had other plans. She started fussing somewhere over Kansas. By the time they crossed into Colorado, the fussing had become urgent wailing. Ethan tried the bottle. She turned her head away, milk spilling onto his already stained button-down. He tried the pacifier. She spat it across the aisle. He tried rocking, bouncing, humming every half-remembered tune from his own childhood. Nothing worked. The crying only intensified, raw and desperate, as if Lily was trying to communicate something he was too exhausted to understand. Ethan felt the familiar weight crushing his chest. He knew what everyone was thinking. He could see it in the way the woman, 3 rows up, kept sighing, each exhale a little sharper than the last. In the way the businessman across the aisle gripped his armrest tighter with every decibel. They were thinking what strangers always thought when they saw him alone with Lily, that he was failing, that babies needed mothers, that he was just a poor substitute trying his inadequate best. They weren't entirely wrong. 8 months ago, Ethan couldn't tell a onesie from a sleep sack. 8 months ago, he had never changed a diaper without his wife's gentle corrections. 8 months ago, Beulah was supposed to be here doing all the things that mothers somehow know instinctively. But Beulah had held Lily exactly once, for maybe 10 seconds in the delivery room, before the hemorrhaging started, before the doctors' faces changed, before Ethan's entire universe collapsed into a single devastating sentence. We did everything we could. Now here he was, alone on a plane with a screaming baby and no idea what to do next. Sweat dampened his collar. His hands trembled. Lily's face was scarlet, her little fists clenched, her body rigid with distress. Every passenger from row 10 through 20 was staring, whispering, judging. The flight attendant was approaching with that practiced smile that meant trouble, her eyes already scanning for solutions that would quiet the disruption. "Sir, is there anything?" "I'm trying," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "I'm trying everything." That's when she stood up. A woman from the seat beside him. Someone he'd barely noticed during boarding. She had warm brown skin, exhausted but kind eyes. A small girl, maybe 4 years old, slept curled against the window beside her, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. The woman didn't ask permission. She didn't introduce herself. She simply stood, turned toward Ethan, and held out her arms. "Give her to me," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Ethan's first instinct was to refuse. Strangers didn't just take other people's babies. That wasn't how the world worked. But something in her voice, a quiet authority born from deep experience, made him hesitate. And in that moment of hesitation, the woman reached down and lifted Lily from his trembling arms as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The cabin fell silent. Even the businessman stopped his irritated sighing. Everyone watched as this stranger cradled Ethan's daughter against her chest and began to hum. Low, soft, a melody somewhere between lullaby and prayer. She swayed gently side to side, her eyes closed, her body moving in a rhythm that seemed older than memory. And then, impossibly, Lily stopped crying. Not gradually, not in fits and starts, but all at once, as if someone had answered a question she'd been desperately asking. She let out one last shuddering breath, then nestled her face into the woman's neck and went still. Ethan watched in stunned disbelief as his daughter's tiny fingers curled around a strand of dark hair, holding on as if she'd found something she'd been searching for all along. The woman opened her eyes and looked at Ethan. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Around them, the cabin's tension dissolved like fog in morning sun. Passengers returned to their books and screens. The flight attendant retreated without a word, as if she'd witnessed something too intimate to interrupt. "I'm Sarah," the woman said, settling into the empty middle seat between them. Lily was already half asleep, her breathing slow and even against Sarah's collarbone. "And before you ask, I'm not some baby whisperer. I just remember what it feels like." What feels like? Ethan managed. Sarah's eyes drifted toward the darkened window. Being so tired you can't think straight. Feeling like everyone's watching you fail. Wondering if you'll ever figure this out. She paused. And when she spoke again, her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I spent the first year of my daughter's life convinced I was the worst mother alive. Turns out I was just the only one trying." Ethan glanced at the little girl sleeping peacefully across the aisle. She had Sarah's gentle features but softer, rounder, with the peaceful expression only children manage in sleep. "Her father?" he asked, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, that's none of my—" "It's fine," Sarah said, though something tightened in her jaw. "He left when Kate was 6 months old. Said he wasn't ready to be a dad. Funny how men figure that out after the hard part's already started." She let out a small, humorless laugh. "My mom was the only one who helped. She moved in, took care of Kate while I worked my nursing shifts, held me together when I was falling apart." Her voice caught slightly on the last word. "She died 6 months ago. Heart attack. No warning, no goodbye. Just gone." Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that went beyond sympathy. He knew that kind of loss. He lived with it every single day. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it in a way he hadn't meant anything in months. "My wife died giving birth to Lily. She never got to hold her. Not really. Just once for a few seconds. And then—" He couldn't finish. He'd never been able to finish that sentence. Sarah turned to look at him, and Ethan saw the full weight of exhaustion in her eyes. Not just tiredness from a sleepless night, but something deeper, the exhaustion that comes from carrying grief alone for so long you forget what it feels like to put it down. "So we're both doing this by ourselves," she said softly. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I guess we are." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky lighten outside the window. Lily slept on, her small body rising and falling with each breath, completely unaware of the two broken people holding her up. Across the aisle, Kate stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about butterflies before settling back into dreams. She was looking at you, Sarah said suddenly. Lily, when I was holding her, even when she was crying hardest, she kept checking to make sure you were still there. Sarah adjusted Lily slightly, and the baby sighed contentedly. She's not crying because you're doing something wrong, Ethan. She's crying because she knows how hard you're trying. Babies feel everything. The fear. The love, all of it. Ethan felt something hot and unexpected burning behind his eyes. He turned toward the window so Sarah wouldn't see. My wife, he said, his voice rough. Right before she died, she said, find someone who will love her like I love you. I thought she meant for Lily. But now I think. He stopped, unable to continue. Now you think what? Sarah asked gently. Ethan shook his head. I don't know. I don't know what I think anymore. The pilot's voice crackled overhead, announcing their descent into San Diego. Cabin lights flickered on. Passengers began gathering belongings, preparing for landing. Across the aisle, Kate's eyes fluttered open with the instant alertness only children possess. Mommy, she called, her voice thick with sleep. Then she saw Ethan and Lily, and her eyes went wide. Mommy, there's a baby. Sarah smiled, the first real smile Ethan had seen from her. I know, sweetheart. This is Lily, and this is her daddy, Ethan. Kate studied Ethan with the serious intensity of a 4-year-old making important assessments. Why is he sad? He's not sad, baby. Just tired, like us. Kate considered this, then nodded as if it made perfect sense. My grandma went to heaven. She announced to Ethan matter-of-factly. Mommy says she's watching from the clouds. Do you think she can see the plane? Ethan felt his throat tighten. I think she can see everything. I think she's probably really proud of you and your mommy. Kate beamed. Then she pointed at Lily, who was starting to stir. Is the baby going to cry again? I don't think so, Sarah said, looking at Ethan. I think she found what she needed. The plane touched down with a gentle thump. The cabin erupted into the usual chaos. Passengers standing before the seatbelt sign dimmed. Yanking bags from overhead bins, jostling for position. Ethan reached for Lily, and Sarah handed her over carefully, their fingers brushing in the transfer. Thank you, Ethan said. The words felt desperately inadequate. I don't know how to. I mean, you didn't have to. I know, Sarah said, already gathering Kate's things, stuffing the rabbit into a small backpack with the efficient motions of a mother who'd done this countless times. But I wanted to. Sometimes that's enough. Kate tugged at Ethan's sleeve. Are you coming to our house? I have toys. I can show the baby. Ethan looked at Sarah, expecting her to gently redirect her daughter's invitation. Instead, Sarah paused, her hand on the seat in front of her, and met his eyes. I'm not ready, she said quietly. For whatever this is. Whatever it could be. I just lost my mother, and I'm barely holding together, and I don't know if I can. I understand, Ethan said quickly. I wasn't expecting. But Sarah continued as if he hadn't spoken. I work at a cafe, Rosewood Cafe on Maple Street. Kate and I are there most mornings. She reached into her bag, pulled out a receipt, and scribbled on the back. No pressure. No expectations. Just if you ever want to. Ethan took the paper, folded it carefully, tucked it into his pocket. Rosewood Cafe, Maple Street. Mommy makes the best hot chocolate, Kate added helpfully. With extra marshmallows. The line finally moved. Sarah picked up Kate and stepped into the aisle, then turned back one last time. She's beautiful, Ethan. Lily. She's really, really beautiful. Sarah's voice caught. And she's lucky to have you, even if it doesn't feel like that right now. Then she was gone, disappearing into the stream of passengers. Kate's sleepy face peered over her shoulder until they turned the corner and vanished. Ethan stood there for a long moment, Lily warm and solid in his arms, the receipt burning a hole in his pocket. The businessman pushed past with an impatient grunt. But Ethan barely noticed. He was thinking about Beulah, about her last words, about the way Lily had stopped crying the moment a stranger held her. He was thinking about grief and exhaustion and the impossible weight of doing everything alone. And he was thinking about a little girl who wanted to show Lily her toys, and a woman with tired eyes who remembered what it felt like. The months that followed were both endless and impossibly fast. Ethan went back to work at Gate Tech, back to the routine of daycare drop-offs and midnight feedings and weekend trips to the park where other parents smiled at him with that particular mix of pity and admiration reserved for single fathers. He got better at the practical things: bottle temperatures, sleep schedules, the art of grocery shopping with a baby strapped to his chest. But the loneliness didn't fade. If anything, it settled deeper, filling the quiet moments when Lily slept and the apartment felt too still, and Ethan found himself staring at Beulah's photo on the mantel, wondering what she'd think of the father he was becoming. He kept the receipt in his wallet. Sometimes, late at night, he'd take it out and trace the handwritten letters with his thumb. Rosewood Cafe, Maple Street. Some mornings he'd put Lily in her car seat and drive toward that part of town, telling himself he was just exploring. He'd park across the street from a small cafe with a green awning and flower boxes in the windows, and he'd watch families come and go, couples sharing pastries, mothers meeting for coffee while their children played. He never went inside. 8 months passed. Lily learned to crawl, then pull herself up on furniture, then take her first wobbly steps across the living room into Ethan's waiting arms. She learned to say dada and no and more, her vocabulary expanding weekly. She was becoming a real person with preferences and opinions and a laugh that sounded like bells. Ethan loved her so fiercely it sometimes hurt to breathe. But there were nights when she'd cry inconsolably, and nothing Ethan did could calm her. On those nights, he'd hold her and rock her and whisper the same words he'd whispered on the plane. "I'm sorry, baby. Daddy's trying." And sometimes, in the darkest hours, he'd think about a stranger who'd held his daughter for 20 minutes and done what he couldn't do in 20 hours. He thought about that night more than he wanted to admit. About Sarah's tired eyes and Kate's serious questions, and the way the cabin had gone silent when Lily stopped crying. He thought about how Sarah had said she just wanted to be held by someone who wasn't afraid, and wondered if she was right. He thought about her every time he passed a mother and daughter in the grocery store. Every time he saw a woman with dark hair. Every time Lily reached for someone who wasn't him. On the morning of Lily's first birthday, Ethan woke before dawn. He lay in bed listening to Lily babble through the baby monitor and made a decision. He got up, showered, dressed Lily in her nicest outfit, a yellow dress with little flowers that Beulah's mother had sent, and drove across town to Maple Street. The cafe was exactly as he remembered from all those times watching from across the street. Green awning, flower boxes, a small chalkboard sign advertising the daily special. Through the window he could see mismatched tables and chairs, local art on the walls, the kind of cozy warmth that made you want to stay. And there, behind the counter, was Sarah. She wore an apron dusted with flour. She was laughing at something an elderly customer said. Her whole face transformed by the smile, and Ethan felt his heart do something strange and unfamiliar in his chest. He almost turned around, almost got back in the car and drove home and convinced himself this was stupid. That 8 months was too long, that she wouldn't remember, that he was being ridiculous. But then Lily made a sound. Not a cry, not a laugh. just a small, curious noise. Ethan looked down at his daughter. "What do you think, Lily?" he asked her. "Should we go in?" Lily blinked at him with Beulah's hazel eyes and said very clearly, "More." Ethan laughed. A real laugh, the kind he hadn't heard from himself in months. "Okay," he said. "Okay, Lily. More it is." He pushed open the door. A small bell chimed overhead. The smell of coffee and fresh bread washed over him. The cafe was half full with the morning crowd. People on laptops. Couples sharing breakfast. An older woman reading a newspaper in the corner. No one looked up as Ethan walked in. Except for one person. In the far corner, at a small table by the window, sat a little girl with dark curly hair pulled into lopsided pigtails. She was bent over a piece of paper, coloring intently, her tongue sticking out in concentration. Next to her was an empty chair with a stuffed rabbit propped against the back. Ethan recognized her immediately. She was bigger now, older, but she had the same serious expression, the same careful way of holding her crayon. Kate. As if sensing his gaze, Kate looked up. Her eyes went wide. Then she let out a shriek that made every head in the cafe turn. "Mommy, Mommy, it's the airplane man. The airplane man with baby Lily." Sarah nearly dropped the coffee pot she was holding. She spun around, her eyes scanning the cafe until they found Ethan standing by the door. Lily in his arms, looking like he wasn't sure whether to run or stay. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Lily wiggled in Ethan's arms, pointing towards Sarah with one chubby finger, and made a sound Ethan had never heard her make before. "Ma," she said clearly. "Mama." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. "Lily, no, that's not." But Sarah was already moving. She set down the coffee pot, came around the counter, and walked toward them with tears streaming down her face. Kate had jumped from her chair and was running too. Her drawing forgotten, her rabbit abandoned. "You came," Sarah said, stopping just a few feet away. Her voice was shaking. "I thought. I didn't think." "I wasn't going to," Ethan admitted. "I almost didn't. About 100 times, I almost didn't." "Then why did you?" Ethan looked at Lily, still reaching for Sarah, still making that sound, "Ma," like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Because she hasn't stopped asking for you," he said. Not in words, obviously. But every night, before she falls asleep, she makes this humming sound. It took me weeks to figure out where I'd heard it before. He paused, his throat tight. "It was the song you sang to her on the plane." She remembered. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "That was my mother's lullaby," she whispered. "She used to sing it to me when I was little. I didn't even realize I was." She remembered, Ethan said again. "And so did I." Kate had reached them, bouncing on her toes with barely contained excitement. "Is baby Lily going to play with my toys now? I told her she could. Remember, Mommy? On the airplane." Sarah laughed, a wet, wonderful sound, and bent to her daughter's level. "I remember, sweetheart. Why don't you show her the corner where we keep the crayons? Lily might like to draw." Kate's face lit up like sunrise. She looked at Ethan hopefully. "Can I hold her hand? Please? I'll be really, really careful." Ethan set Lily down on her feet. She was steady now, had been walking for 2 months, though she still preferred holding onto something. A table edge. A pant leg. A finger. She looked up at Kate with wide, curious eyes. "Hi, Lily," Kate said solemnly, extending her small hand. "I'm Kate. We're going to be best friends." Lily studied the offered hand. Then she reached out and grabbed Kate's fingers, and the two of them toddled toward the corner table. Kate chattering about all the important things Lily needed to know about crayons and coloring and the best way to draw butterflies. Ethan and Sarah stood watching them go. standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "She called you Mama," Sarah said softly. "I know. I'm sorry. She doesn't really understand." "Don't apologize." Sarah's voice was firm, but there was something underneath, something fragile and hopeful and terrifying all at once. "My mother used to say that children know things adults are too scared to see." She turned to look at Ethan. Really look at him. And he saw she was crying again. But smiling too. "Maybe she sees something we're not ready to admit yet," Sarah said. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "What are you saying?" Sarah took a breath. "I'm saying that for 8 months I've been thinking about a man on an airplane. A man who was clearly terrified and exhausted and in over his head, but who was also holding his daughter like she was the most precious thing in the universe." She stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could smell coffee and flour and something that might have been vanilla. "I'm saying Kate asks about you every day. She draws pictures of the airplane man and baby Lily. She puts them on her bedroom wall. And every time I see them, I wonder what would have happened if I'd been braver. If I'd given you my number instead of just an address. If I'd trusted that what I was feeling on that plane wasn't just grief and exhaustion, but something real." "Sarah." "I'm not done." She was crying harder now, but her voice was steady. "My mother died never knowing if I'd find someone. She used to tell me that good men are the ones who stay. Not the ones who make promises or say the right things, but the ones who stay, even when it's hard, even when they're scared, even when they don't know what they're doing." She reached up and touched Ethan's face, her palm warm against his cheek. "You stayed. For 8 months you've been doing this alone, and you stayed. For your daughter, for Beulah, for yourself. And now you're here, and my daughter is teaching your daughter how to draw butterflies. And I don't know what happens next. But I know." "What?" Ethan managed. "What do you know?" "I know that when you walked through that door, I finally understood what my mother meant. About good men. About staying." She smiled through her tears. "I know I don't want to do this alone anymore. And I don't think you do either." Ethan felt something break open inside him. Not a wound. A wall. A wall he'd built 8 months ago in a hospital room, brick by brick, every time someone told him he was doing great, every time someone said Beulah would be proud, every time someone looked at him with pity and called him brave. He'd built that wall to protect himself, to keep the grief contained, to make sure no one could ever hurt him the way losing Beulah had hurt him. But standing here in this tiny cafe on Maple Street with this woman who'd held his daughter on an airplane and sung her a lullaby and somehow remembered what it felt like, the wall didn't seem so important anymore. "I don't know how to do this," he said, his voice cracking. "I don't know how to be. I don't know if I can." "Neither do I," Sarah said. "But maybe we can figure it out together. One day at a time. One cup of coffee at a time." She glanced at the corner where Kate and Lily were now both covered in crayon marks, giggling at something only they understood. One butterfly drawing at a time. Ethan followed her gaze, watching his daughter laugh with pure, uncomplicated joy. Lily looked up, caught him watching, and waved. A clumsy full-arm wave that nearly knocked the crayon out of Kate's hand. "Dada," she called out. "Dada, look." "I see, baby," Ethan called back. "I see." The elderly man behind the counter. The cafe owner. Ethan would later learn. A man named George, who'd known Sarah's mother for 40 years. Cleared his throat loudly. "Hey, Sarah," he called out. "You going to introduce me to your young man? Or should I just keep pretending I'm not watching this whole thing like my favorite soap opera?" Sarah laughed, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "George, this is Ethan. Ethan, this is George. He's going to give you free coffee and a muffin because he's romantic, and he's been waiting for this moment since I told him about the airplane. George snorted. I'm giving him free coffee, because anyone who makes you smile like that deserves at least that much. He looked at Ethan with eyes that had seen years and stories. Blueberry or chocolate chip? Chocolate chip, Ethan said. Good answer. Sarah, take your break. I'll handle the counter. Sarah led Ethan to a small table near the window, across from where Kate and Lily were still creating their masterpiece. Morning sunlight streamed through the glass, catching dust motes floating in the air, making everything look softer, more golden than it had any right to be. This is where my mom used to sit, Sarah said, running her hand over the worn wood. Every morning for 20 years. Right here with her tea and crossword puzzle. George keeps it reserved for her, even now. Old habits, he says. Ethan looked at the empty chair across from him and suddenly understood. This table wasn't just a table. It was a shrine, a memory, a promise. A place where love had lived and continued to live even after the person was gone. What was her name? He asked. Ruth. Ruth Ellen Foster. Sarah smiled, and there was no sadness in it. Just love, just gratitude, just the quiet peace of someone who'd learned to carry grief without being crushed by it. She would have liked you. She would have said you have honest eyes. Do I? The most honest I've ever seen. George appeared with 2 coffees and 2 enormous chocolate chip muffins. He set them down without comment, then retreated with a knowing wink. So, Sarah said, wrapping her hands around her mug. What happens now? Ethan looked at her across the table. This woman who'd stepped into his life for 20 minutes on an airplane and somehow changed everything. He looked at the little girls in the corner, already inseparable after 10 minutes. Their heads bent together over shared paper. He looked at the empty chair where Ruth Ellen Foster used to sit and thought about Beulah and thought about how grief and love were sometimes the same thing, just wearing different clothes. Now, he said slowly, I think I'd like to hear about Ruth. And maybe you'd like to hear about Beulah. And maybe, if it's okay with you, I'd like to come back tomorrow. And the next day. And the day after that. Until those girls over there are so sick of each other, they're fighting over crayons instead of sharing them. Sarah laughed. That wet, wonderful sound again. That might take a while. Kate's pretty stubborn. Good thing I'm not going anywhere. Outside the window, the sun continued to rise. Inside the cafe, 2 broken people sat across from each other and began, slowly, carefully, to tell each other their stories. In the corner, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old created a drawing that would later be framed and hung on a wall in a house that didn't exist yet. A house with a green door and a backyard with a swing set and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee and fresh bread. But that was later. Right now there was just this, 2 cups of coffee, 2 chocolate chip muffins, and the sound of children laughing. Right now, there was just Sarah's hand reaching across the table and Ethan's hand meeting her halfway, their fingers intertwining like they'd always been meant to fit together. Right now, there was just a single dad and a single mom. Both tired, both scared, both hoping that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't have to do this alone anymore. And in the corner, Lily looked up from her drawing, saw her father holding hands with the woman from the airplane, and smiled. It was a smile that looked exactly like Beulah's smile. That smile Ethan had been so afraid of losing. But he realized now he hadn't lost it at all. He'd just been waiting for the right moment to see it again. Dada, Lily said, pointing at her drawing. Look, family. Ethan looked at the paper, a chaotic mess of color that might have been 4 stick figures if you squinted. He looked at Kate, nodding proudly at their collaborative work. He looked at Sarah, crying again, but smiling too. Yeah, Rosie, he said, his voice thick with something that felt like hope. Family. If this story made you feel anything, and I know it did, then you owe it to yourself to subscribe. We don't post trash. We bring stories that hit different. Stories that make you cry at 2 a.m. Stories that remind you what it feels like to be human. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because the next story drops soon, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Click that button now, or you'll be scrolling through garbage while everyone else is getting the good stuff. Thank you.